There's something, what should we say, quintessentially British about the art of the non-apology. I'm sorry you're upset. It's it's a carefully managed, choreographed performance in which institutions, when caught red-handed, contort themselves into elaborate evasion, offering expressions of regret rather than full-throated contrition. A gesture of goodwill. As a gesture of goodwill, we'll give you this. When Avanti is caught out bullying its customers, and they finally listened to the conversations which were had weeks ago. They say, as a gesture of goodwill on this occasion, we will offer a refund. It's all too little too late, isn't it? When the local council lies and is caught out and can't actually substantiate their lie, as a gesture of goodwill, lessons have to be learnt. Yeah, the point is, these people in positions of authority, that's the problem. These people have positions of authority, and they bully and they lie and they sneer at the public, and then occasionally they're caught out and they won't back down. And these sort of linguistic contortions, lessons will be learned as a gesture of goodwill, or slipping into the passive, to avoid actually identifying who has said what and when. This linguistic armour of bureaucratic and government evasion, shielding these bureaucrats from the moral and legal weight of admitting failure. The ongoing MI5 scandal exemplifies this culture of evasion rather well, where an institution exposed in wrongdoing refuses to grant the very thing that would be most meaningful to its victim, an apology. And the problem, I think, is that an apology has grown to the point where it comes with a sort of with a financial hitch. It doesn't need to. For most people, an apology is enough if it's a real apology, if you believe it. But if it's handled by a complaints department, and if it's at such a distance from the person who committed the offence, yeah, you want as much money as you can claw back. Because it doesn't mean anything anymore to the institution. The institution is going to continue to treat other people as appallingly as it just treated you. At the centre of this MI5 scandal is a person who is called Beth, a woman who suffered horrific abuse at the hands of her partner, an MI5 informant known only as Agent X. X, a violent neo-Nazi misogynist, used his status as an intelligence asset to coerce and manipulate Beth before attacking her with a machete. And MI5, rather than taking responsibility, provided a false evidence to 3 courts to obscure the true nature of their dealings with X. And when exposed, MI5 have issued an unreserved apology, but not to Beth. Instead, it was an abstract concession, a rhetorical sleight of hand designed to satisfy public scrutiny while withholding an actual apology from the person most harmed. And Beth's response is quite right. It's devastatingly clear. Where's my apology? What MI5 is engaging in is not just legal manoeuvring, but a profound moral failing. MI5 is there to protect us. And if necessary, it has to protect us from itself. Their apology, crafted for public consumption rather than personal accountability, is symptomatic of a broader British institutional reluctance to admit wrongdoing. It's a refusal that extends far beyond the intelligence services and into the very fabric of British governance and British bureaucracy, and particularly the civil service. Britain has long cultivated an image of resilience and moral authority, rooted in its imperial past and its self-conception as a nation of unyielding pragmatism. Apologies, especially from state institutions, are perceived as concessions that erode national prestige. Unlike Germany, which has built its post-war identity on acknowledging historical crimes, Britain has instead constructed a narrative of reluctant imperial beneficence. To apologise sincerely means dismantling that narrative. And apologies have consequence. A genuine admission of guilt invites scrutiny, legal action, potential financial reparations. And the British government's protracted refusal to acknowledge abuses during the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya was not because it was unaware of the atrocities committed, but because it feared the precedent that such an apology would set. In the case of MI5, a direct apology to Beth might serve as a legal admission of negligence, opening the floodgates for further lawsuits. What we need to do is to divorce apology from scrutiny, legal action, and financial reparation. But we shouldn't be ducking the personal apology, the personal investment of time. If I were in MI5, which I'm not, I would make a personal visit to Beth. MI5's refusal to confirm Agent X's status under the long-standing principle of neither confirm nor deny demonstrates how institutional secrecy is weaponized against victims, and the Investigatory Powers Tribunal, which is meant to offer a form of redress, has ruled that much of Beth's case will be heard in secret, excluding her from knowledge of MI5's defence. This is a classic institutional playbook. Shift the battle to a forum where the victim is effectively silenced while ensuring that any resulting accountability is purely symbolic. Apologies, of course, can be contagious. If MI5 were to acknowledge its failure fully in Beth's case, what other instances of intelligence misconduct could then be addressed? If the British state apologises for its intelligence failure, does it have to then apologise for historical surveillance abuses, police cover-ups, colonial era human rights violations? The refusal to apologise is often a strategic choice to avoid opening Pandora's box. And British political culture doesn't reward humility. Unlike in countries where public contrition can be a sign of integrity, in the UK it's viewed as an admission of weakness. This is why politicians and civil servants are trained in the art of the non-apology apology, where regret is expressed without actual culpability. The phrase, mistakes were made, so beloved by bureaucrats, removes agency entirely. It's the passive voice, as though the mistakes were natural disasters rather than deliberate actions. MI5's response to Beth is a textbook example of this culture of evasion. Instead of offering a direct apology to the person that they failed to protect, they issue a general statement admitting serious errors, a vague term that suggests oversight rather than deliberate deception. And the institution's primary concern remains protecting itself, not providing justice, not protecting us. Beth's demand for an apology is not a personal request, it's a challenge to the broader machinery of institutional accountability. If MI5 can acknowledge errors but refuse to apologise to the victim, then what does that apology truly mean? It means nothing. It's tosh. It's a public relations exercise, not an act of accountability, not an act of contrition. A real apology involves the acknowledgement of harm, clearly stating what was done wrong, including the deliberate deception of the courts, an acceptance of responsibility, not just acknowledging errors, but admitting specific failures in handling Agent X and protecting Beth. It's a direct address to the victim, an apology that's personally delivered to Beth, not just a press release, and it's a commitment to structural change, clear, actionable reforms to ensure this doesn't happen again. And the longer this is delayed, the more Beth or people acting for Beth will demand money in compensation. This isn't going to go away. And MI5 can stop burying its head in the sand because it's being a very silly person, a very silly individual, a very silly institution. I go from the institution to the individuals because it's the individuals that are making the decisions. And they're very silly. Britain's institutions think they've mastered the art of deflection. All they have done is whipped people up into irritation, from Windrush to Hillsborough, from the post office scandal to the ongoing MI5 case and Grenfell Towers. The state has perfected the method of institutional regret, a hollow expression of sorrow that evades actual culpability. From the, I can also think of the innumerable instances of abuse by against whistleblowers in the NHS, the sidelining, the distancing, the ghosting, the gaslighting, and the punishment of people who dare to claim that the system has gone wrong, or that people in the system, high up in the system, are acting badly. And yet it's in the NHS, it's in their contract that if they see something wrong, they're supposed to tell people. But if they do, they not only lose their job, they may well lose their mind. I've seen people who have lost their mind because of this nonsense, because the institution is so desperate to preserve its integrity. It has no integrity. It's an institution. This hollow expression of sorrow that evades culpability. At the heart of this is a reluctance, is a contempt for basic truth. Institutions that serve the public should have the privilege of rewriting history to suit their own ends? No, of course they shouldn't. They should have the privilege of protecting the people they serve. And Beth's case is not just about MI5, it's about the broader British culture of accountability avoidance. Until institutions in the UK are forced to move beyond the calculated apology and towards genuine restitution, the cycle of evasion will continue. Britain's greatest weakness is not in admitting failure, it's in pretending that failure never happened.